The days don't feel heavy, they feel familiar, almost too familiar. Morning arrives the same way it did yesterday, not because anything went wrong, but because nothing changed. And somewhere inside that familiarity, a quiet question forms. Why does modern life feel like it's repeating itself? Is it because our days are actually identical, or because the structures around us make differences harder to notice? And when routine stops feeling supportive and starts feeling circular, where does that shift come from? This isn't a story about boredom or dissatisfaction. It's about patterns, the invisible ones that shape how time feels as it passes through ordinary life. Consider the first pattern. Most mornings begin before any choice is made. An alarm sounds, a screen lights up, notifications arrive from places we didn't visit physically, but still somehow occupy our attention. The sequence feels personal, yet it's remarkably standardized. Millions of people waking to the same sounds, the same interfaces, the same light emitted from similar devices. The day begins already structured. The repetition isn't accidental, it's efficient. Modern systems are designed to remove friction, to reduce decisions, to make transitions smooth. When that works well, it feels like relief. Fewer choices, less effort. But over time, the same efficiency can flatten experience. When the path is always pre-cleared, walking it stops feeling like movement. The sameness isn't in the hours, it's in the sequence, a commute that retraces itself. Tasks are arranged in familiar blocks, meals chosen from a small loop of options. Even leisure arrives on schedule, shaped by recommendations that quietly favor what worked before. Novelty exists, but it's filtered, softened, made predictable enough to fit. Repetition begins to feel like time standing still, even as days continue to pass. What's striking is how little of this feels imposed. No one is forcing the routine. It's simply easier to stay inside it. The systems reward consistency. They remember preferences. They optimize for return. Slowly, life becomes less about encountering the unexpected and more about revisiting the familiar. Not because we want less variety, but because variety now requires effort. This is how repetition settles in quietly, not as monotony, but as smoothness. A life that runs without interruption, without friction, without sharp edges to mark one day as distinct from the next. The pattern isn't visible at first, but once noticed, it explains something subtle. Why time feels compressed, why weeks blur together, why yesterday is easy to recall, but hard to separate from today. This is only one layer of the repetition. There are others. Repetition doesn't only come from schedules. It also comes from environments that rarely change. Think about the spaces where most modern days unfold. The same rooms, the same streets, the same digital layouts. Even when locations differ, their structure often doesn't. Offices resemble other offices. Cafes echo familiar designs. Screens present information in nearly identical ways. The setting changes, but the template remains. This is the second pattern. Modern environments are optimized for recognition. They are designed to feel immediately understandable. You walk in and know where to stand, where to look, what to do next. That clarity is comforting. It removes uncertainty, but it also reduces contrast. When places stop surprising us, they stop leaving strong impressions. Memory depends on difference. A childhood day stretches long in memory, not because it was better, but because it was varied. New rooms, new rules, new sensations. In contrast, modern spaces aim to be frictionless, predictable lighting, neutral colors, familiar sounds. They are built to fade into the background, so work, consumption, or movement can proceed without interruption, and they succeed. The problem isn't that these environments are dull, it's that they're consistent. When the visual and sensory input of one day closely resembles the next, the mind has less reason to mark time. The days pass, but they don't separate themselves clearly in memory. Digital environments intensify this effect. A message arrives in the same place every time. News scrolls in the same format. Entertainment loads within the same frame. Even when the content changes, the container does not. The brain learns the shape quickly. After that, it stops paying close attention. This creates a strange illusion. Life feels busy, yet indistinct, full, yet repetitive. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything is happening inside the same few shapes. Over time, this consistency teaches the mind to expect sameness, to move quickly, to skim, to anticipate what comes next before it arrives. The moment becomes shorter, less vivid, easier to pass through without noticing. Repetition, then, is not only about doing the same things, it's about seeing the same forms, living inside familiar layouts that gently encourage the mind to go on autopilot. None of this feels dramatic. That's the point. The days don't announce their similarity. They simply line up quietly, one after another, shaped by spaces that look different only in small, forgettable ways. And when time is no longer marked by difference, it starts to feel like it's looping instead of moving forward. There is another layer beneath this one, less visible, but just as influential. Repetition also comes from roles, from the way modern life asks people to show up as the same version of themselves again and again. This is the third pattern. Most days require a narrow range of behavior, a certain tone, a certain pace, a familiar way of responding. Over time, this repetition of self becomes just as noticeable as the repetition of place or schedule. Think about how often the day calls for improvisation, not planning, not reacting, but genuine uncertainty about who to be next. For many, those moments are rare. The expectations are already set. Work has a version of you it recognizes. Social spaces do too. Even solitude often follows familiar scripts, the same jokes, the same opinions, the same ways of filling silence. Consistency is usually treated as a strength, and in many ways, it is. It creates trust, stability, predictability. But when the same role is performed continuously, without interruption, it can flatten time. One day feels interchangeable with the next, because the same self showed up in both. This doesn't mean identity is false. It means it's rehearsed. Modern systems reward coherence, profiles, histories, preferences, records. They remember who you were yesterday and quietly expect you to be the same today. Deviations are possible, but they often feel like extra work, explaining, reintroducing, reframing. So most people don't change much from day to day, not because they can't, but because nothing requires them to. The repetition of self becomes comfortable, automatic. You wake up already knowing how the day will ask you to behave. The surprise is gone before the day begins. This affects how time is experienced. When identity stays fixed, experiences blend. There are fewer internal markers to separate one day from another. Memory becomes smoother, less detailed, not empty, but compressed. Looking back, it feels like time sped up, but in the moment, it simply felt normal. The repetition of roles also creates a quiet distance from experience. When responses are practiced, attention softens. The mind moves ahead of the moment, already preparing what it knows will be needed next. The present becomes thinner. This isn't a failure of awareness. It's a natural response to predictability. And predictability is everywhere. The days feel repetitive, not because nothing is happening, but because the same version of life keeps happening through the same version of us. There is one more pattern underneath all of this, the one that ties the others together. Repetition ultimately comes from how modern life handles change. This is the fourth pattern. Change still happens, but it's packaged in small, manageable units, updates instead of transformations, adjustments instead of shifts. The surface moves while the structure stays the same. A new app replaces an old one, but the gesture remains. A new routine forms, but it fits into the same hours. A new goal appears, but it's pursued through familiar systems. Progress is real, yet contained. Life evolves without ever rearranging itself. This creates a specific feeling, the sense that something is moving forward while nothing feels different. Modern systems are built to absorb change without disrupting flow. That's their strength. They allow life to continue smoothly. But that smoothness also erases thresholds. Few clear beginnings, few clear endings. Without those markers, time loses its edges. In earlier eras, change was often disruptive. New phases came with visible breaks, different locations, different roles, different rhythms. Today, transitions are quieter. They happen inside the same spaces, the same screens, the same days of the week. So the mind registers continuity instead of contrast. Weeks don't end so much as they fade into the next. Months stack without distinction. Even milestones arrive already familiar, because they were anticipated, scheduled, and simulated long before they happened. The result isn't dissatisfaction, it's disorientation. Life feels full, but oddly flat. Busy, but circular. Not stuck exactly, just looping gently. The repetition isn't loud enough to protest, it's soft enough to accept. This is why modern life feels repetitive. Not because it lacks meaning, not because nothing changes, but because change has been smoothed until it no longer punctuates time. When days follow the same sequences, unfold in the same spaces, require the same selves, and absorb change without interruption, they begin to resemble one another. Memory compresses, time accelerates, the present becomes thinner, and yet, within this repetition, life is still happening. Quietly, continuously. Not in dramatic moments, but in small variations that are easy to miss. The repetition is not a mistake. It's a pattern, an invisible one, and once seen, it explains something many people sense but struggle to name. Why yesterday feels close, why last year feels recent, why tomorrow already feels familiar. Not because life is empty, but because it has become very, very consistent.